These are this afternoon's top stories. Tourism Minister Grant pledges support for developing land-based tourism. St. Kitts and Nevis committed to eradicating hunger, and Ebola virus may remain in survivors' bodily fluids for months. Good afternoon and welcome to the ZIZ Midday Newscast. Today is Friday, 16th October 2015. I am JD Keynes. In national news, while cruise tourism in St. Kitts and Nevis continues to reap benefits for employees within the tourism sector, the situation is not the same for land-based tourism. This week, the Honorable Lindsay Grant pledged to dedicate much of his time to boosting that aspect of the nation's tourism product.
We have serious challenges in that area because, as I just said, cruise tourism generates about 1 million passengers per year. On the other hand, land-based only accounts for about 110,000 visitors per year, and so we have a lot of work in that area. And that is why I have said, and I continue to say, that my focus in my tenure, my first 5 years in the government, would be to focus the attention on land-based tourism and to get that part of the industry as vibrant as the cruise sector is at the moment.
Minister of Tourism, the Honorable Lindsay Grant. Minister of Agriculture, the Honorable Eugene Hamilton, has endorsed the theme chosen for the observance of World Food Day 2015, which speaks to eradicating hunger and poverty. In his address to mark the occasion, Minister Hamilton said world hunger continues to spiral out of control.
When it comes to hunger, the only acceptable number in the world is 0. 10 years ago, world hunger stood at 800 million. Despite efforts and focus on the situation, today it has worsened to 1 billion persons who do not get enough quality food to allow them to lead healthy lives.
The theme for this year's observance is social protection and agriculture, breaking the cycle of rural poverty. The Agriculture Minister said the theme highlights the need for greater attention to be placed on promoting food security.
This theme has been chosen in a bid to draw global attention to the role that social protection plays in eradicating the hunger and poverty when it is prioritized in national development agendas. World Food Day should be considered globally as an occasion to discuss with partners substantial ways to focus on 1. Food availability, affordability, distribution, which all contribute to food security.
14 designers have been confirmed for Renaissance Red, a 4-day fashion production being organized by St. Kitts Fashion Events. During this week's launch, media representatives learned that the company had booked New York designers Roger Gary and Jay Weeks, Trinidadian designers Claudia Pigas, Jamaicans Uzuri International Kurt Campbell, and Red Ibis Designs, while Kimon Baptiste will represent St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The local designers will be Tamisha Cranston and Kaive Mimi Armstrong of Eccentric Me, Yakima Daniel of Kiwi Dan Couture, Chantal Vanderpool of Naturally Royal, Lavella Benjamin Chavanese Lake of Unique Designs, and Lulu's Closet by Icy Jewelers. CEO of St. Kitts Fashion Events, Griffin, said her team has been working to ensure they step up the fashion industry in St. Kitts and Nevis.
We have models, we have designers, we have production team, we have photographers coming in from overseas this year, which is a huge plug for us. This is the first time we're actually having a photographer who's photographed New York Fashion Week for over 20 years, and we're so proud to have him on board this year. Renaissance Red will be held in St. Kitts from Friday 20th to Monday 23rd November. Regionally, in St. Lucia, the Department of Human Services wants parents to reconsider the use of corporal punishment as a form of discipline. The call was made as the department expressed outrage over the recent death of a 4-year-old boy who was allegedly abused to the point of death. Sarah Peter tells us more.
Relatives of 4-year-old Milan Ferdinand say the youngster had been diagnosed with a swelling in his brain and there appeared to be marks of violence about his body, including what seemed to be a bite mark on his chest and bruises on his face and ears. The bruises reflect years of punishment. The Department of Human Services says parents need to stop using corporal punishment to discipline their children, as it could lead to a child's death, as seen in the case of little Milan Ferdinand.
Corporal punishment in particular is one that could end up in what we have seen today. I guess it's sometimes not until it actually happens that people really understand the implications. So as we go around, people will say to us, I was bitten as a child and it has done nothing to me. Look at me today. Look at the man or woman I have become. But the point is, inflicting that level of harm onto another human being is certainly not the way to change any behavior. And in some cases, the behavior never changes and the corporal punishment escalates to the point of death.
Lewis called on the society to truly reflect on the way they treat children and urge persons not to turn a blind eye in cases of child abuse.
We recognize in St. Lucia the issue of corporal punishment in particular is one that is embedded in our culture. And so for many of us, corporal punishment is not abuse to the extent that we see a need to report. And so when we have to reflect as a society, really and truly, the death of this child, Milan, is one that should ring out in our minds in terms of how do we as a society protect our children? Do we leave it alone to the social service agency? Or are we to take it on as a community response? Because certainly when the parents fail, somebody somewhere must step in.
Lewis further described the recent death of young Milan Ferdinand as alarming.
This is certainly disturbing, extremely disturbing for us at Human Services, for me in particular. The loss of a child in any form or fashion is something that hurts many persons. In this particular case, it is one that resonates here because of the reports that we have received to date. And I must tell you, we have been in contact with the police and we have been informed of the ruling following the autopsy on this matter, which makes it even more disturbing. This case is one that is certainly not unique to St. Lucia, because at Human Services we get reports, several reports, and we work with families regarding issues of physical abuse of children.
The Department of Human Services went on to express concern over what they say is the prevalence of child abuse cases on the island. For the DBS News World, I am Sarah Peter.
A United Nations mission dispatched to Guyana and Venezuela is reporting that there is a positive will by both countries to return to full-fledged diplomatic relations, even as Guyana's ambassador to that country is yet to take up her office.
The chef de cabinet, Susan Malcora, who headed a United Nations mission here on Monday and spent the last 2 days in Venezuela, has returned to New York. In a press statement, the UN official is quoted as saying she is pleased at the progress toward a way forward in the controversy that is mutually beneficial to both South American nations. With the objective of continuing discussions on the way forward in the Ghana-Venezuela border controversy, the UN delegation met with President David Granger and Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro this week. The foreign ministers of both countries and other government officials were also consulted during the visit, according to the United Nations. On Wednesday, Governance Minister Raphael Trotman said Guyana's ambassador to Venezuela, Cheryl Miles, is being briefed about taking up her office there after describing the situation as one that takes time.
We're still in the process, as I said, of engaging the UN and briefing our ambassador. So it's a matter not of if, but of when. She's not formally there, but preparations are in train for her to, of course, move her belongings and her property over to Venezuela. So we expect that when the UN team returns, things will move a little faster. So it's, as I said, those impediments have been removed. So it's important to note that though the Venezuelan ambassador was not physically here, she was not recalled. She was invited home for talks, which is really a euphemism. The way states use diplomatic devices to speak to each other. The Venezuelan flag remained at her place of residence, flying, which is a strong sign that the ambassador, in a sense, is still in residence, even though not physically there, but the presence was still acknowledged.
The recent UN mission visit was part of the next steps agreed during the trilateral meeting held among the Secretary General and both presidents at the 70th UN General Assembly last month. Reporting for Capital News, Mark Murray.
Internationally, researchers have found that the Ebola virus can remain in the bodily fluids of survivors for up to 9 months. Osama bin Javed reports.
Hundreds of Ebola survivors may be at risk of carrying the virus for much longer than previously thought. 2 new studies suggest that the disease can exist in the semen of male survivors for at least 9 months after the initial infection, and further outbreaks of Ebola via sexual transmission cannot be ruled out. US and Liberian researchers found that a Liberian woman was likely to have been infected by an Ebola survivor about 6 months after he was infected. Another study funded by the World Health Organization, Centers for Disease Control, and the Sierra Leone government found traces of Ebola virus in semen samples from a group of 93 survivors.
Clearly, this is something that does not happen extremely frequently, especially considering how many Ebola cases there have been overall in the epidemic. However, we do want to really make sure that this is something that is really addressed as much as we possibly can, because any new case of Ebola could spark another epidemic.
The study is ongoing and more conclusive results are expected later. Researchers cannot say how long signs of Ebola might exist or if the traces of the virus discovered in bodily fluids were live or infectious. They also cannot answer if women survivors can also carry the virus.
We're looking at things like sweat, oral fluids, vaginal fluid, breast milk. We would like to look at all of these different fluids to be able to understand if virus might be present in them after a person has recovered from Ebola virus disease.
There's been growing concern about relapse after a British nurse who survived the Ebola virus in Sierra Leone fell critically ill again.
Yeah, I was definitely frightened, but Ebola is so unpredictable.
But Pauline's condition is being treated as an exceptional case. Doctors say they have not recorded any other survivor who's had a relapse. The Ebola epidemic killed more than 11,000 people, mostly in Guinea, Liberia and Sierra Leone. And for people who lived through the outbreak, the fear that the virus may return still remains. Osama bin Javed, Al Jazeera.
After nearly 3 weeks of violence between Palestinians and Israelis, Palestinian militants say they are ready to end the truce with Israel. That's been in place since last year's war with the Jewish state. Maina Rabi reports.
Speculation over a new Palestinian uprising or intifada has been growing, and now militants in the West Bank say they're ready to end the truce with Israel that's been in place since last year's war that left 2,100 Palestinians dead.
The brigades promise the wounded and the martyrs that they will remain ready to fire until the freedom of the prisoners and of Jerusalem is achieved from the Zionist occupiers.
Their statement comes during a period of escalating violence between Palestinians and Israelis in Jerusalem and the West Bank. In less than 3 weeks, 40 people have been killed and there's no end in sight. In the latest incidents, a Palestinian posing as a journalist in Hebron tried to stab an Israeli soldier before he was shot dead. In Bethlehem, Israeli police again responded with tear gas to stone-throwing Palestinians on the city's main street. Similar scenes in the West Bank town of Ramallah. Israel is on heightened security. Thousands of police deployed around Jerusalem's Old City, near the Al-Aqsa Mosque, a contested holy site that's been the epicenter of the latest violence. Still, with militant Hamas calling for another day of rage against Israelis, this man says people are getting ready for whatever is coming next.
Taking a look at the weather, temperatures will peak at 28 degrees Celsius or 82 degrees Fahrenheit. Winds are easterly at 9 to 16 miles per hour. Seas are slight to moderate with waves of heights 1 to 1.2 meters or 3 to 4 feet. Today will be partly cloudy with a brief chance of showers. Tonight we can expect fair to partly cloudy skies with a chance of brief passing showers overnight and early in the morning. Sunset for today will be 5:49 p.m. and sunrise for tomorrow will be at 6:04 a.m. That brings us to the end of ZIZ's Midday Newscast. Join us this evening for these stories and more in detail. I have been your presenter, JD Keynes. Have a great afternoon.